Hey everybody, it's Refresh, and I'm here to take a look at the Arcane Tempo Challenger deck for Magic the Gathering. This is from the 2019 series of Challenger decks, and this is a version of the Arclight Phoenix Tempo deck. We have a 60-card deck, a 15-card sideboard, the deck box, which is this, and the spin down life counter. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. Here's our deck box. Inside we have our life counter. We've got one of these spacers, and here is our insides. We have the deck, we have the sideboard, we have a ad of some sort, then a card divider to help separate the main deck and the sideboard. Here's our main deck. So that's the deck. Here's the sideboard. Alright, more removal in case you need to go up against creature decks, and some more counterspells for control decks. I'm gonna play this against its peers, and I'll be back to let you know what I think. So I've had a chance to play with this deck a bit, and I have some thoughts. This is a deck that has some potential power, but I think it's also a deck that is missing some key pieces to make it good. And that all starts with the fact that there are not a lot of threats in this deck. You are winning by either going wide with the Murmuring Mystics, hitting with the Crackling Drakes, or being able to get down Niv Mizzet Parun. If you're lucky, you'll find your one of Arclight Phoenix somewhere in there and also get there. But this is, I think, based on the, is it Drake's deck? Except that it doesn't have the Enigma Drake, because I think it's rotated out by the time that this deck came out. This is especially important because we have Niv Mizzet Parun as a curve topper as opposed to Arclight Phoenixes, and I understand that these are expensive cards, so it would make a lot of people feel bad if this were packed with Arclight Phoenixes, but this is like the one resilient threat in the entire deck. Crackling Drake does replace itself, and Murmuring Mystic does go wide per se, but for the most part, you are really trying to get there with this set of cards here, and if your opponent deals with this set of cards, or you're not able to draw into this set of cards, you are not going to win this game at all. And so this is a very fragile deck. I think that's why there are the two dive downs in this deck, because you need them to protect your threats. If your threats are dead, then you are dead. I think one thing that is pretty good about this deck is that it does have all these Sulfur Falls, and so that is some relatively fast mana for your deck that really wants to play sort of an aggressive game. Now, again, the problem with this deck is that it doesn't have really much to do except removing your creatures that your opponent plays and then trying to get to playing the 4-drops while not dying before then. I think that's why we have the Shocks and the Lava Coils, to try to get rid of your opponent's big threats in turns 2 and 3, and then hopefully you'll be able to land one of these on turn 4. Oftentimes, though, you play one of these on turn 4 and it'll just get killed. And so you are stuck with no capacity for resilience. And again, Arclight Phoenix is that one capacity. If this creature dies, you can cast 3 spells and then it'll come back and it'll hit again. And I think that's why the full powered version of this deck actually has multiple Arclight Phoenixes. But should you run out of these cards, or if they are dealt with somehow, and you just can't land Niv Mizzet Parun and keep him on the battlefield, then you are pretty much going to die. So it's a very fragile strategy. Now you can put a ton of these cards in the graveyard, get to your Crackling Drake quickly, play your Crackling Drake, protect it with a dive down, and smash for, a huge amount of damage if a lot of these are in the graveyard, because that's how Crackling Drake works. But I think just as often you're going to be stuck without a threat and unable to finish your opponent off because of that. So even though the word tempo is there, I don't know where a lot of this tempo value comes from. Because yeah, you're drawing cards off of these radical ideas, ops, charter courses to try to get to your threats and everything, but you're not really winning your opponent on mana value most of the time, unless I guess you're removing big creatures with Lava Coils. And so I find that this deck is a little fragile and can have some explosive wins, but also can dirtle and do nothing a lot of the time. This is also compounded by the fact that there are 4 guild gates in here, and there are no shock lands. And I think that this deck needs some shock lands to stay fast and stay aggressive. The sideboard here, I think, kind of makes sense. There are board wipes for small aggro decks. There are more removal options in the Shivan Fires and the Beacon Bolt if you need to kill more things, and then ways to steal your opponent's bombs, and then a few things to deal with control decks. I do think that this deck in particular, because of the weird way that it plays, really needs a strategy guide for a player that doesn't have any experience with playing Standard to really know what these cards are supposed to be doing and how you're supposed to be moving towards your win condition. And I also think that it would be useful, as always with these challenger decks, to have a strategy guide for the sideboard to know what to put in against what deck and what comes out versus those kinds of decks, because this can be a hard deck to navigate. And as such, I'm not terribly impressed with this deck. I feel like it needs more resilience. It either needs more Arc-like Phoenixes in this deck, which I know would increase the value of the deck, but it just needs that. Or it needs other threats besides the Crackling Drakes and the Murmuring Mystics, which are actually quite slow. And so if you like playing a lot of instants and sorceries, this is your Spellslinger deck, but there's not a lot of options when it comes to this type of deck within the Challenger deck framework. And so I think it's a bit of a miss in the fact that it doesn't quite get there all the times, and it's very fragile to your win conditions being removed. Pick up this deck if you like the Spellslinger, if you like the Niv-Mizzet Haruns, but I think many people will find this deck possibly frustrating to play because of its fragility. That's my thoughts. If you have any experience with this deck, the real Izzet Drake's deck, or perhaps some other Arc-like Phoenix deck that is in Izzet, let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, you can hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.